In today's video, we show 6 teenagers losing control in court as their harsh sentences range from tears to tantrums to desperate attempts to justify their actions. These teenagers were convinced they would get off lightly, but the moment they are confronted with the harsh reality is shocking. Number 1, Dylan Schumacher. The 16-year-old Schumacher has been charged with second-degree murder and child abuse on the evening of March 19, 2013. Ashley Smith said goodbye to her 2 sons to start her night shift at the restaurant, leaving them in the care of her boyfriend Schumacher. Little did she know that this would be the last time she would see her sons alive. 4 hours later, Springville police officers responded to a 911 call from Schumacher. The 23-month-old boy he was looking after was unconscious. The police rushed to the house, but the child was already dead. Alarmingly, his face, neck, and arms were covered in bruises. The next day, Schumacher was arrested. It turned out that the little Austin had been crying all night, which made Schumacher so angry that he covered the 1-year-old's face with a pillow and beat him to death. At his sentencing, Schumacher burst into tears in court and apologized to his ex-girlfriend. It was a moving moment, but the judge knew details that Schumacher did not know. His activities that night also came to light. The 16-year-old blonde had no tears left when he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Music. Number 2, Dylan Schumacher's actions were heinous, but Dante Rye is hardly inferior to him. Dante W. was charged with aggravated robbery and second-degree murder. On October 4, 2016, a janitor found the body of 18-year-old Jordan Klee, a high school athlete from Michigan, just minutes from his home. The young man had been killed by a single gunshot to the back of the head. The crime was a robbery gone wrong. Jarius Allison, 19, Del Reno Gracie, 18, and Dante WGHD, 17, had been staged. WGHD was identified as Schutz in court. WGHD showed no remorse when K's mother testified. W just grinned at her. Then B, he asked to speak in court and mocked everyone present. I just wanted to tell you that I will be home soon. Rest in peace, Kieran. I love my family. But his smile quickly disappeared when the judge read him the riot act. In my 23 years, I have never rejected a settlement between the parties, but seeing you sitting here laughing and shaking your head as if it were nothing makes me reject the settlement. We will go to court, and if you are found guilty of murder, you will go to prison for the rest of your life. Dante W.'s face changed suddenly when he realized what a terrible mistake he had made. The court adjourned the hearing for an hour so that the Klee family could decide whether they wanted to go to court. Luckily, the Klees had had enough of seeing him. The trial continued, and R was sentenced to 52 years in prison, which after 25 years probation could be suspended. Number 3, Thomas T.J. Lane. Rid behavior in court is already hard to bear, but just wait and see what Thomas T.J. Lane did in the courtroom. Lane was charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder, and aggravated assault on the morning of February 27, 2012. The students at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio were eating breakfast in the cafeteria when chaos suddenly broke out. A brave coach drove the shooter away, but 3 students died and 3 others were injured, including Nick Walchuk, who is now in a wheelchair. Witnesses identified the gunman as Thomas T.J. Lane, a former Chardon High School student who had a personal feud with one of his victims who was dating his ex-girlfriend. Lane was quickly arrested, and the court decided to try him as an adult under threat of the death penalty. The teen pleaded guilty at the sentencing. Lane entered the courtroom and opened his blue shirt to reveal a white t-shirt as the victim grinned while testifying. Lane smiled and rolled his eyes when the judge asked him if he wanted to say anything else. The unrepentant youth gave the victim's family members the middle finger and said, "I'll be out soon." Lane was sentenced to 3 life sentences, but that wasn't the end of his story. A year later, Lane made headlines again when he escaped from prison with 2 other inmates, but the escape lasted only 6 hours. Lane was transferred to a maximum security prison where he was only allowed 1 hour of yard time a day. Number 4, Nicolas Leans. At T.J. Lane's lack of remorse made his sentence more severe. Perhaps he should have sought advice from Nicolas Leans, who missed the chance for a shorter sentence due to his bad attitude. The 16-year-old was charged with premeditated murder on the evening of February 21, 2011. Officer Dave Crawford of the St. Petersburg Police Department in Florida responded to a call reporting a suspicious person near the Tropicana Field Stadium. Crawford spotted the suspect getting out of a vehicle, and seconds later, all hell broke loose. Officer Crawford was found with multiple gunshot wounds when he reached for his escape. 200 police officers swarmed into the city for a major raid. Finally, the 16-year-old Nicolas Linza was arrested, although he continued to claim his innocence. But the investigators still had a trump card up their sleeve. Good old mom and dad, they talked to him for 30 minutes and finally got him to tell the truth. Linz was arrested and his father gave him strong words of advice. You are doing the right thing now. He then persisted in the shooting the case, went to court, and Linz tried to reduce the charge to murder. He was portrayed as a frightened teenager who grew up in an unsafe neighborhood and panicked. The prosecution disagreed. Linza was found guilty and sentenced to life without parole. But a year later, an unexpected ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court brought the case back into the spotlight. Linza had the chance of a reduced life sentence if he behaved correctly in the retrial. During the retrial, Officer Crawford's family presented impressive testimony about why Lynch should spend the rest of his life behind bars. Lynch's entourage argued differently, but the judge was not convinced. Throughout the entire trial, Lynch showed no remorse. And when the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment again, Linza took it calmly. His mother also showed no concern. Verdict: unimpressed. Number 5. Cook social apps, a great way to meet new people, make friends, and even find love. But for some like Andrea Cook, they are just a means of finding victims. The 18-year-old Cook is charged with car theft, attempted car theft, and aggravated assault in June 2017. Mary and her boyfriend Emmanuel Purcell drove to Cook in South Daytona. He had chatted with Cook on the dating app Meet Me a few seconds after Cook got into the red. Then a masked gunman got in. The masked gunman was Cook's 17-year-old boyfriend Kenrick Bess, who fired the gun and hit one of the men as the car theft failed. Cook planned another operation for the next day. This time, she recruited 4 men. Cook opened the dating app and lured her next victim to an intersection in South Daytona. She got in the car and drove to James Street Park. While they were talking, became with his crew, knocked on the window and stole the car. Months later, the two were finally caught and brought to trial. Cook pleaded guilty, but mother and daughter were shocked when the judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Bart asked for a final hug with her mother, but was led away in handcuffs. Later, it turned out that they were right to be shocked because their lawyer told him something completely different than a yes. She's obviously not going to prison. She has no previous convictions, so she can expect probation or community service. Based on this information, her case was reopened, and KCK was finally sentenced to 11 years in prison. Number 6. Scandal Jackson. When Rosetta Jackson heard about the murder of Non Potter on the news, she only felt pity for the victim and his family. She had no idea that her son had committed the murder. Scandal Jackson is charged with first-degree murder and robbery. It all started on July 6, 2009, when Nathan Potter, a 21-year-old student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, was on his way to his apartment in the River West District off campus. After a night of drinking, the 19-year-old Jackson and his friend Derek Thomas ambushed him and demanded money. When Potter said he had no money on him, Jackson shot him in the chest and killed him. Jackson fled and hid with relatives in Mississippi, but his uncle Gerald Hawkins had had enough and informed the police. During the trial, Jackson showed no remorse, made gestures to the Potter family, and even smiled at them as he was led out of the courtroom. But the confident smile disappeared when the verdict was announced. Jackson was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jackson freaked out, shouting obscenities, and had to be taken out of the courtroom by the deputies with pepper spray and violence. His family members also shouted at the victim's family. Obviously, it runs in the family. Which of these cases shocked me the most? And do you think the punishments for these dangerous young people are appropriate? Write us your opinion in the comments.